Up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So, come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde, and boy, do we have a special guest today. My main man, Michael Arrieta, is in the house. Michael.
I'm excited, Darius. It's going to be the best part of my whole week.
This is all about greatness, my friend, and you are doing tons of the greatness in the world, so I'm so glad to have you here. Did I pronounce your last name properly?
You nailed it. Arrieta or Arrieta, either way is perfect.
Oh, Arrieta, you like that?
I like Arrieta.
Having the last name Mershazde, you get really careful when it comes to. I don't like to butcher last names because people butcher mine all the time, so I'm very sensitive to that. So, all right, Arrieta it is. Look, for listeners who are new to the show, Greatness Machine, we're about two things: people who are living their passions and those who are creating greatness in the world. And Michael, my man, is full of passion and greatness. So we're gonna be talking all about the things he's doing today at Garden City, plus some of his background, which is super interesting. I want to kind of give a little background on why I asked you to be on the show. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, go right ahead.
I'm a person that is, my number 4 core value is curiosity, and I'm just curious by nature. And I'm a big believer in Gallup Strength Finders. So individualization is my number 5 strength, which means I love like the individual stories. I love what makes people special. And when I see something that kind of sticks out to me that is unique, especially when it comes to individuals, I always like gravitate towards it. So I don't know how you ended up on my LinkedIn feed, but this is like a couple years ago. You ended up on my LinkedIn feed, and I saw that you were talking about Cutco. And I have a bunch of friends who I dubbed the Cutco Mafia: John Rulin, Justin Donald, Hal Elrod, all these dudes. And I saw that you said something about that. And I think I commented, I said, "Oh, go Cutco Mafia" on your feed. And you probably don't remember this. And then I go start digging in because I'm just a curious guy. And I see that, man, you're a chief of staff of Dell Computers and DocuSign. And you're in your 30s, right? Early 30s? Yeah. And I'm like, what is this? Like, that's not normal. And so I was like, dude, this is super interesting. So that's how you ended up on my feed then. Fast forward to like 2 years ago, you start doing the stuff at Garden City. And I'm like, oh, that's super interesting. And we're going to be talking about what you're doing at Garden City in a second. But it's really, you're trying to build what the world's most passionate holding company, right?
Yeah. I've never had anyone ever call it that, but that aligns exactly to my heartstrings. Yeah, probably the world's most passionate holding company.
And my number 2 strength is communication. So I'm a stickler for words, and like the words you use and the way you show up, man, I was just like, that guy looks really interesting. I want to get to know him better. So that's why I had my team reach out, man. I'm so glad you could make it here on the show today.
I'm really excited. I had no clue exactly what we were going to talk about other than greatness. And one of my family values, I was just telling my kids this morning, is our 4th family value is give it the best, or give it your best.
Yeah.
So we just try to go above and beyond it with everything. So I love the word greatness. So hopefully we get to dig into that.
I love that, man. So, take us back, because, I don't think, look, I do actually believe some people are just born to want to like go out there and make it happen. I consider myself one of those types of people. It looks like you're one of those types of people, but take us back, man. Like how did you get started? Give us the origin story. I'd love to have the listeners understand where do people begin, because I think a lot of times people just assume that people end up in these places where they're doing really cool things. It's like, no. Like, there was a lot of building blocks that got you there, but take us back to the beginning of what got you started to where you're at now.
Yeah. I was born and raised in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was born in Miami, first one in my family born in the U.S. My 2 older sisters and my parents are Puerto Rican, so they were born and raised in Puerto Rico. I was in my mother's belly when we moved over to Miami. So I was the first one born over here. First language was Spanish. I had a severe stutter problem my whole life, just about. That was a huge insecurity of mine, which funny enough ended up becoming my greatest blessing. Because of that stutter problem, I was able to get a state disability grant to go to any private school that I wanted to. My father and mother, they had difficult financial means. So my family never made more than $50,000 as a household income ever growing up. So that disability allowed me to go to a good school. A pretty neat statistic that now is coming out a lot more is kids that grow up in poverty, 2 out of 3 get out of poverty by simply having access to positive examples. So that's what I had. I had all these positive examples of these entrepreneurs that were seeking greatness, these doctors that were doing great things, these entrepreneurs, whatever it may be, right? I just saw that it was possible. Never in my life growing up until that point did I ever think it was possible. So I finally saw that they pooped and peed just like the rest of us, you know? And so I was like, wow, this is actually possible. So that got me kind of out of my, bubble. And I was like, wow, I could actually be like these families that I see, right? And so my father got really sick when I was in my early teens, and that kind of lit something in me as the only other man in my family to say, it's time to step up. So I said, can I be a waiter and makes a good amount of money? I was like, that doesn't make enough money, unfortunately, for what I'm trying to do. And then a buddy introduced me to Cutco knives. So I started selling Cutco at 17. And as you mentioned, I became the #1 salesperson in Cutco that first year, employed, started making like 6 figures.
Wow.
As a junior in high school, did the same thing as a senior in high school. And I kept doing that all throughout college to put myself through out-of-state tuition, graduate debt-free, help my family. So that's kind of how I got started. It was very humble beginnings. It was a mess, brother, to be honest with you. It was a mess. My parents argued a lot. They got separated. My dad was in and out of the hospital. But by the grace of God, they're happier now than ever before. And there's been a good ending to it. So very grateful.
Wow, that's so crazy. So you started, so your family was, you were born in Puerto Rico or born here in Miami?
I was born in Miami. First of my family born here.
Got it. Okay. So the family, so and I'm assuming you still have family back in Puerto Rico. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. And so that's crazy. So how did you, I mean, like Cutco goes, and I know they really they recruit pretty heavily out of the universities, right? How did, like, you're a junior in high school and you're like, how did that fall in your lap?
Well, one is you're supposed to be 18 years old when you sell Cutco knives. Let's just say that I was a couple months away from being 18.
Right.
But that just fell in my lap that one day, one of my good friends, he just said, Mike, sky's the limit with Cutco. There's these kids out there that they're selling, $1,000 per appointment, making $500, or selling 2,000, making 1,000. And so I was like, you know what? I have a stutter problem. So it'd be really weird for me to make cold calls, but that shouldn't hold me back. And I go to a good Christian private school, which maybe those families will do me a solid and meet with me.
Yeah.
And so I just put myself out there. So I went with training. I started with my friends that I knew, which is, by the way, still the best way to do anything today.
Yeah.
Is people that know and trust you. And then once people know and trust you, understand what you're doing, and it's mutually valuable for both of you, you just simply ask them to refer you to others, which is the same thing I do today, 20 something years later in a different capacity. But so I would meet with my friend Brett's mom and tell her, hey, I'm selling Cutco knives. They're good knives. And she would like some knives. And at the end of the appointment, I would say, if you don't refer me to anybody, I'm not going to have anyone to see. And so she would say, okay, well, here's the name of my next door neighbor, and here's the name of my friend, and here's the name of so forth and so forth. And I'd go home after school and I'd call them. I'd ask the teachers to go to the bathroom in the middle of class and go to the bathroom and cold call. In the middle of lunch, I would sit outside and cold call. And so I would wake up every morning at like 6 a.m. and cold call before school. So I was extremely driven, Darius, like extremely driven.
Yeah.
Like in a way that I don't know if I'll ever be that driven again, but I think I just had such a desire to provide for my family. And more importantly than that, I wanted to prove myself that I was good at something. I was never good at school, really. I was never good at sports. I wasn't good looking, and so I really just wanted to prove myself into the world of like, hey, there's something I could actually be good at,
Yeah. Especially when you're doing wake up calls for people at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Oh, yeah. Did I wake you?
Hey, well, let me tell you about what I'm doing this summer. I'm selling Cutco knives.
How are you cutting your bread this morning? Um, that's great, man. So yeah, so you went to University of Alabama, Roll Tide. That's cool. And you get done with that, and then you end up in tech. Now were you in San Francisco? Is that correct?
Yeah, I was in San Francisco for
Okay,
almost
cool.
10 years.
I was there for 17 years. I lived in San Francisco
Wow.
before I moved to Austin. So did you live in the city or did you live outside the city?
I lived right in the city. Well, the first couple of years, Menlo Park, San Jose, and then the last couple of years, right there in San Francisco.
Well, okay, I'm going to ask because I'm a local in San Francisco. What streets did you live on?
I lived on Bay Street in the Marina.
Oh, okay, you're in the Marina. My brother had a house on Lombard.
Okay,
So,
great.
yeah, right on the gates of the Presidio there. So anyway, all right, I digress. I love to talk San Francisco. So so you get to San Francisco. Walk us through, like, because you really did an amazing. I mean, it sounds like this hunger to be successful is obviously something that translated into your life once you got into tech. Tell us like about your tech story, because the things that you did from to become the chief of staff of some of the most iconic, tech companies in the world. That's not normal, especially to do it at such a young age. To walk us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, I never wanted to get into tech, to be completely honest with you, because I never understood it really. So coming from Cutco, I excelled, to the best that I could at Cutco. But I knew that I hit a limit there. I knew that I hit a ceiling there, that you could only make X $100,000 a year. Like I was never gonna be the person on the other side of the table buying 10, 20, $30,000 sets of knives and business gifts, right? That was never gonna be me doing what I was doing. And so I always said, like, who's the guy that writes the checks, right? I don't want to be the athlete on the team. I want to be the sports owner, right? And so I always kind of had that mindset. And so I asked my father-in-law, I go, Gary, what can I do to keep doing kind of what I'm already doing, but at a higher capacity? He said, you have one of two options. You could either sell like luxury private aircrafts for 10, 20, 30, 50 million, or you could go into software and you can make a life in an enterprise software. And so I said, okay, I'll go the enterprise software route. And I just met one guy that he gave me the chance. His name was Tarkin Manor. He was the CEO of Wyse. And he just gave me a chance. And he didn't care that I was young. He said, Alexander the Great conquered the world at whatever, 19. And so I have high expectations for you, which is really cool. And I just became his mini-me. So I became his apprentice, his chief of staff, his go-to, his jack of all trades, just an extension of him, right? And it was cool. I was 21 years old, or however old I was, 22. And I was just in every CEO meeting. And then Michael Dell acquired us. So I was in every meeting there with him. And I got to go all around the world and do M&A and do international expansion. It was amazing, but I was in water in over my head. Right. And also I got into a big organization like Dell, and although I understand operations and processes and everything, I really liked the entrepreneur grit, right, that I had in Cutco, where sky's the limit, where you could be entrepreneurial, where you could be creative, where it's building rapport, where your role is not really defined, right? You're managing everything from A to Z. And so I just had that itch to get into startup world again, likewise. And so someone told me about DocuSign, and so the CEO of DocuSign, he was looking for a chief of staff, similar role, kind of jack of all trades, extension of him. So I joined him in 2014, and we grew that company from about 150 people, and I was there for 6 years. And we grew it to about over 5,000 people.
Wow!
And so, yeah, that was kind of the ride in Silicon Valley. And throughout all that, though, I had this crazy desire of saying, although I'm in tech, I'm not a tech guy. Because I'm just a meat and potatoes guy. I'm a 1 + 1 = 2. Like, I like boring, unsexy businesses that everyone can understand. It's how I grew up. It's what my family members did. And so even though I was in tech with non-tangibles, things you couldn't touch, see, or feel, right? I still craved it. Hence why the Garden City story later.
Yeah. So that's, and I can't wait to get there. Backing up for a second, it's funny. You said a few things in that, you came to this country with your family and obviously, like, first generation, I mean, Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States, but it's almost like its own country, right? Like it's everyone there speaks Spanish, and it's a different world when you go there. And then through luck or faith or whatever, you end up getting into a school that opens your eyes to what is possible.
Nailed it.
And And then here you are, and you get into tech, and you meet a person who doesn't put a lid on you and says, anything, this is what's possible, right? I had a guest on the show who, really interesting guy, who we were talking about. He ended up went the opposite direction, where he ended up in state penitentiary by the time he was a teenager. And I asked him, you just kind of brought this up, this idea in my head, where I said, well, why didn't you want more? He's like, I didn't know that there was more out there. Exactly. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because like I grew up in an environment where upper middle class, where my dad was in the services business. We'll be talking about that. He was an entrepreneur. He owned gas stations, right? Yes. So I grew up, and my parents, the exposure they gave me was the other way. They said, you need to see what it's like not to have. So I had to go be a gas station attendant when I was 10, right? But I knew, like, that was the opposite of what I was around, right? Like, to see people that were living at minimum wage on more or less poverty, right? Like, so how do you reconcile that? Or what are your thoughts around people that maybe don't have the ability to be around, to get that exposure, to know what normal is? Like, if things have been different, how might you have, like, maybe thought about how to get yourself in those circumstances? Because I feel like you've done a really good job of getting yourself in these situations where you see what you want and you go surround yourself with people that have got it before.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And I love how you're strategically kind of zooming out. I do think that those big milestones of my life is what you kind of started to hit upon. It was that there was a big milestone of stutter that led to a disability of being able to put myself in an environment with affluent families that could afford to go to Christian schools. So I would see them and be like, these people are no more special than I am, right? Something I always say is, we all pee, poop, and die. And that was something that I saw, was these families are no more special than my family. And so I could achieve that. So that was one milestone. Then it was my father getting really, really sick, and me coming to this Cutco world and seeing the John Rulins and the Hal Elrods and all these folks on stage and make all this capital. And I got to see them, and I'm like, they all pee, poop, and die. There's nothing special about them. Well, I could achieve that. And then once I achieved that, then I saw the people I was selling to that were these business owners, right? Or there were these successful people, right, that had successful families. I was like, well, I could be that. And then same thing at Dell, right? And then I saw these entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, and I said, I could be that. And so what I would say is, all these people that we so idolize, or all these people that we so put on a mantle, right? Once you spend time with them in intimate settings, and it's not just all a bunch of BS, but it's actually vulnerable, authentic conversations, you realize there's nothing that much special to them, right? There's a couple of key common indicators that they all carry and do, right? Like, like humility for the most part, hungry and grit, smart, right? Humble, hungry, smart, a lot of those three. But so I got exposed through that. My advice to people would be that if you're just working in an accounting job, or if you're working for a small business in Des Moines, Iowa, right? Or whatever it may be, wherever you're listening to this podcast, if you're like, well, Mike, I don't have the ability to see those private school families and get into their kitchen and get to understand their story. I don't have the environment to be with Michael Dell or all these Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. What do I do? Well, you're doing it now. You're learning. You're on a podcast. There's so much information readily available to us now than ever before. Do you know something I hate, Darius? I hate when I read XYZ person just paid $100,000 or $1 million to go have dinner with Warren Buffett. You're going to go pay that amount of money for a 1 or 2 hour dinner when he spent 3, 4, 500 hours writing these books of his, right? So what I mean is, I believe that if you're high intention, if you have high intention, you could get the same amount of knowledge that it took me to get through experience, right? If you just go out and try to seek it.
Yeah, I love that. And so true. I think that they recently spent $14 million to have lunch with him.
Yeah, well, I'll go spend $27 and get 100 times more information by reading his books,
Right. Yeah. It's there's this idea of proximity, right? And maybe you can't get lunch with Buffett, but to your point, you can surround yourself with his videos, his books, his podcasts, his interviews. I mean, I love Warren Buffett. Like you don't know this, but I'm a huge fan of his. And like the fact that when we talk about Garden City, I know that there's some correlation there with what you're doing next. But yeah, I love that. I really appreciate that answer. And I was just curious because you obviously came without those hookups, and I think there is, seeing is believing, right? To your point, and that helps. But today in this world we live in, I'm a little older than you. I'm 44 years old. I'm on the cusp of Gen X and millennial, right? Like and since my dad was foreign, like I'm a little old school. But the reality is we have so much access now to information that we never had access to before, just with the internet, that's a game changer for anybody. You can pull yourself out of any situation by going and learning and educating. So I really appreciate that you said that.
Now, let me share one other thing that's a very tactical tip that I would suggest to people that I did. So in Silicon Valley, when I was working for someone, I felt like I did not have all the mentorship that I wanted. I felt like I asked myself, if I could meet and learn from anyone in Silicon Valley, who would it be and why? And there was a guy I really admired named Pat Gelsinger. Now he's a CEO at Intel, right? Before he was the CEO at VMware. And so I just shot him a cold email. It was very heartfelt. It was very authentic. It was very curated to just him, right? I invested the time to read his books. I invested the time to understand what he stood for. And I sent him an email. Pat told me almost nobody, even though the tens of thousands of people that have read his book, nobody has really reached out in an authentic way to seek for advice and counsel and mentorship. Well, now you fast forward 15 years later, Pat's one of my lead investors now at Garden City, right? Wow. He's one of my dearest mentors. I've done that, Darius, countless times. And now with communication of LinkedIn, and now with all these data websites, you can access people's information. Use something like Loom, right? If you don't know Loom, go Google it. But instead of writing an email with just letters, go record a Loom video and send it to your number one person you would love to mentor you, right? That might be another way to get exposure, to put yourself out there.
Let me ask you a question about that, and it's a great point. And that, again, with access, and if you go do your work, you did the work, by the way, the homework to make it where he wanted to spend time with you, as opposed to like, oh, this kid's just like carpet bombing every top CEO in Silicon Valley, right? Yeah. So when you went in there, you're like, I want, he's my number one. I want him to mentor me. What did that look like when you started having him mentor you? That you guys go grab a donut and hang out like once a month? Like, what does mentoring look like to you?
You just nailed it. I think it comes in three stages. One is constant cadence. So that is exactly it. Is maybe not once a month for a CEO that busy, but once a quarter. 90 days flies by, right? So once a quarter, just getting a reoccurring meeting on his calendar with his assistant, right? Typically early in the morning. For Pat, it was always like 6 or 7 a.m. at their office, right? Number two is advice and counsel as needed, right? In terms of just as something comes up, I pop him here and there. And then number three is find a way to get out of the norm in terms of something unique, like, hey, can we go on a hike? Or hey, can I go to a charity event with you? Or can we, something out of the norm that actually builds a relationship. The first two are very tactical in terms of directly input, directly output, right? I always try to do the third one to actually build a relationship,
Yeah. So hiking it is.
so hiking, like we would do things in Batora Valley,
Nice.
There'd be that, or he's a big biker, right? And so those come over time. But I think that's the easiest thing for a mentor. I get so many emails of people, Darius, on LinkedIn especially, that just always ask me for my time. And there is not one, they barely even know the name of my firm,
Right.
They don't do the homework, exactly as you said, right? It's carpet bombing, exactly as you said, which no one, it's a little things that still work today, but no one really does it, right?
Yeah. Well, what's in it for you? You're like, yeah, oh yeah, of course, man. Like, this sounds great. Like you wrote me a generic email, don't know anything about me, and you want my time, which I have very limited amount of, and I can't buy more of it. So sure. Where do I set up for that, bud? What's in it for me?
So something I do now, Darius, that I tell people is as soon as they ping me something back, I just say, hey, instead of jumping on a call or meeting, why don't you just ping me the 3 things that you most want to talk about? 95% of people don't reply back.
Yeah.
It's work.
Yeah, of course. And I think that people don't want to do the work. If some do, but most aren't the Mikes of the world.
And those that do end up becoming great.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So now here you are. You have had these high flying jobs. You've got to rub elbows and shoulders with some of the biggest and baddest names in the valley. And you're like, DocuSign obviously gets sold, right? So I'm
We go
guessing
public.
you went public, excuse me. And so you had a bit of an exit, I would assume, out of that. But you have never really been an entrepreneur before. How do you parlay that into like, all right, I'm going to go start a fund? Like, how does that work?
Such a good question. This is such a neat story. So ever since I can remember, like I would walk into whatever, McDonald's, and just be like, man, how do they not realize like that, if they just greeted me in a different way, that I would be a happier customer? Or how do they not change their product offering? Or how is there not pricing and packaging that's more applicable to different markets that they're in? Or I would check into a hotel, right? And I would just see things from finance to culture to accounting or to marketing to check-in to the linens they use to the pool service, everything. And for some reason, the tangible operations of a business at a dry cleaner or whatever it may be, a car wash especially, would always stick out to me. And as I got older and older and older and more into tech, I would just realize like I have a spidey sense of kind of those boring businesses. There was one time that I remember coming off a plane, and there was a woman, when you're boarding off a plane and there's the people there that are cleaning the plane and they have like the orange vest on. Yeah. There was a woman that she was cleaning the plane, and as I was going down, she quickly went into a row. And that was just a very distinct moment to me to realize two things. One is I've always loved the operation of these businesses. But number two, the thing I've loved most is the people who they employ. Yeah. Because right now I feel like we're in a part in our society that we've just put them in a category of the forgotten, of the invisible. They're just a cog in the wheel. They have no purpose, no mission, no dignity, no respect. They barely have any upward mobility, right? And we're fine with that. We barely talk about them. We just talk about the next innovation, And I was like, well, what if I actually just follow what I've always been truly passionate about? What if I follow the true thing that makes me tick? If money were no object, what would I do? I would spend the rest of my life, doing what I just said in those restaurants or hotels or car washes or dry cleaners, right? To make them freaking awesome, right? With culture, with marketing, with innovation, with all of that. And number two is I would radically pursue the enrichment of these working class people. And I will let them know that they do matter and that they do have purpose and that they are super important. And so that to me was the why. As long as I had the why, nothing was going to stop me come up with the what, Yeah. And so that why convicted me so deeply that my wife and I just made a covenant to each other. We were like, we feel as though this is the next calling of our life. And I don't know what space this is called. I don't know how this starts. I don't know how I buy companies, how I transform them. I don't know anything about that. But if the why is so convicting, the what will follow. Wow. And so I would say that before anything, it was the why. From there, what I had to realize after I was utterly convicted of the why, utterly convicted that nothing will stop me, I had to start getting a lot of wise counsel, a lot of wise counsel from people to say, how does this work? How would I go ahead and buy these companies? Is there actually a world that I could go and impact people's lives? Now, granted, 90% of things I heard was you're not going to raise a fund, a private equity fund, when you've never been in private equity, when you've never been in finance, when you've never ran a business. Now you're going to own a bunch, right? Yeah. And so I heard that. And what I would say is that's fine. But even if I was to do this, how would I go about doing it? So one of the things I say to my team probably every single day or two is people support what they help create. People support what they help create. People support what they help create. So if I wanted people to support what I'm about to go do, which I knew I was going to do it, my why was already utterly convicting to me, I had to bring them in to help create it. So once I brought them in to help create this potential thing I'm going to do, they were going to support it. Yeah. Right? They were going to support it. People support what they help create. So I brought in Pat Gelsinger. I said, Pat, I'm thinking about doing this. If I was to do this, how would you go about doing this, Pat? And Pat would give me his advice about saying, hey, I would get, a lot of people to understand technology, because if you're going to transform these companies with technology, you should get technology. Then I would go to another gentleman, right? I go to someone from Costco, the chairman of Costco, and I'd say, I love what you guys do with culture and living wages, right? In your models. But how would you do it if you did a new Berkshire Hathaway, a small business? She would give me advice. She said, well, if I were to do it, I would do it this way. And I kept gathering a bunch of information. And then I eventually synthesized it. And I said, based on what the 50 of you are telling me, you're saying it would look kind of like this, right? Like you said technology, you said you would do this with culture. You said that you would do this, buy companies and hold them forever and not flip them, right? You said you wouldn't have more than 50 investors. So I took all of your feedback that you all said, and I created this thing called Garden City. And people are like, yeah, that's what I told you. Yep. So I'm obviously going to support it. That's what I helped you create. And then all of a sudden it got created. And there was one conversation that almost broke everything. I visited who is now my lead investor, a very big private equity investor here in the country. And he looked at me and said, Mike, no matter what, I'm going to be your lead investor. That's how much I believe in you. But I'm going to tell you right now, you should not raise a fund, and you're not going to be able to raise a fund really. So if I was you, I would just go do deal by deal, the way most people do. They find a company that's going to sell, and they call it a country club deal. They say, well, let me buy it. And then once we're under contract, I'll go raise the capital, because I don't have the capital right now. So I'll go raise it once we're under contract. He said, do that to start off. Get a couple of wins under your belt, buy 1 or 2 companies. Then you raise maybe a $10 or $20 million fund, then later a $50 million fund. Okay. But I don't think you're going to be able to do it. But if you do, I'm your lead investor. So I went home. I spoke to my wife. I said, Veronica, I spoke to, this XYZ investor, and he said he doesn't think I'm going to be able to raise a fund. He said, if I do, he'll be my lead investor, but he doesn't think I'll be able to. And it's a conversation that always brings me goosebumps. Veronica said, if you are so convicted that Garden City is called to exist and there's nothing that could stop you, do not let one person stop you. And the other thing that she said is, if this gentleman is saying that no matter what, he will be your lead investor, he himself believes in it, and he could be your biggest skeptic. And so that conversation, I said, you know what, if I just raise 5 million or 10 million, that's fine. And so I put myself out there ready to fail, which, Darius, that's the number one thing I see from fund managers that reach out to me saying, I want to start this thing. And so they might get all the data. They may people support what they help create. They might get them in there. They might listen to good feedback, right? But then as soon as they have that conversation, right before pressing go, they go for the easy route. They go for the route that lead investor told me, maybe just crawl before you walk, right? And I just said, my why is too big to fail. And so I went for the plunge, and that's how we ended up raising $50 million to start.
Wow, man. I just got goosebumps. That was a really cool. I was curious on how you did it, because I was talking to one of my mentors, telling him about what you were doing. And you ever heard of Stegan Leadership Academy?
No, I don't think
so. You
should
check it out. You would actually probably love it. Rand Stegan is the founder of it, and he's one of my mentors. And we were just chatting because I'm a Stegan grad, and it's a conscious leadership program. So like John Mackey sends his whole executive team, the current Jason Buchel, the current CEO of Whole Foods. He and I graduated in the same class from Stegan. A lot of really interesting leaders come through this program. So Rand, who started this, over 20 years ago, he's on the board of Conscious Capitalism. And I said, hey, have you heard of, I asked him if he heard of your organization. He hadn't, but I said, do you know what a permanent capital fund is? And he's like, do I know what a permanent capital fund is? And he was basically saying, he's like, it's so hard to start those things because everyone wants to know when they can get their money back. and I said, well, there's a guy out there that's doing it. I'm interviewing him next month. He's very aligned with what you're talking about, but yeah, like, I guess it obviously to your point, you came in with conviction. People support what they help create. I love that. There's an alignment there from values and purpose. But when you start looking at Garden City, and I guess we're jumping the gun, the audience is like, what is Garden City? So let's take a step back, and then I'll finish with my question. So you got the 50 mil to start this thing to go buy companies, I guess. But what is Garden City? What are you trying to do with it?
We are trying to do exactly what we said in the beginning, I think, is I've never heard anyone say it that way, is create the most passionate holding company. We are stupid obsessed with small to mid-sized companies. We believe that they're the backbone of America. And there's hundreds of thousands of small to mid-sized companies out there, hundreds of thousands. We talk about Googles and Microsofts and all that, but the real employers of our great country are these small, mid-sized service companies, these small to mid-sized accounting firms, these small to mid-sized healthcare companies, financial service businesses, the blue-collar pool business, the janitorial company. All these sort of things are the things that make our country go round and round.
Yeah.
Okay? And there's a huge thing happening beneath our noses called the Silver Tsunami. We all talk about baby boomers.
Right.
Baby boomers were the most entrepreneurial generation in our country's history. They started more businesses than any other generation in American history. Well, how old is the average baby boomer now? They're in their 60s.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, they're in their 60s, 70s, right? And so these baby boomers that are in their 60s or 70s that were the most entrepreneurial generation, what do they do with their business that they started? There's hundreds of thousands of them. I'll start to give you some data. 250 small to mid-sized companies in America. Half of them are past retirement age. So they're past
250,000 of them?
250,000 businesses that they anticipate make an annual profit of $1 to $10 million a year.
And half of the proprietors of those businesses are past retirement age.
Yeah, so call it 125,000 people are baby boomers, are past 60 years old roughly. And 125,000 proprietors out there, they make an annual profit in their back pocket of anywhere from $1 to $10 million a year.
Right. Okay.
That's 125,000 businesses that are crushing it. They are your local, a septic company. They are your HVAC company. They are your financial service accounting firm. They are your whatever it may be, right? They're your civil engineering firm. They're all those firms, right? And so out of 125,000 of them, 75% of those companies, Stanford predicts, does not have a liquidity or succession plan. So 25% of them do. 25% is like, yeah, my son came in the business 5 years ago. My daughter came in the business, or I have a partner and he still has 10 years in the tank, right? Or we're going to do an ESOP or something like that, right?
Okay.
But 75%, so call it 90,000 companies,
right? Yeah.
They don't
Not
have
sure what to do. Not sure what to do.
Like my wife's grandfather, he owns a nuts and bolts business that they go and distribute nuts and bolts to oil companies in Texas. He's 80 years old and he just doesn't know what to do. He makes a very good profit every single year. And he just like, I don't know what to do. I'm going to eventually have to sell it, but I'll just kick the can down the curb. Who do I sell it to? How do I navigate that? I'm too small for the big private equity companies, those fancy, guys that come in with their suits and shiny shoes. I'm way too big for them. So they're not, or I'm way too small for them. So they're not going to buy me. I can't just go sell it to my neighbor. I make $1 million a year. He can't come up with $3, $4, $5 million to buy me out. So what do I do? Do I just close down the shop, even though I have all these customers that I've been around for 30, 40, 50 years, that I have all these employees? What do I do? So there's this market in the segment of these small to mid-sized companies that are freaking great. They've been around for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years plus. They have strong management teams. They have a reputable brand. They have a good moat. They have a good product and service that they're known for, right? They have great Google reviews and Yelp reviews, right? They're the local sponsors of the baseball fields and the hockey rinks and the high school football games on Friday night. It's those companies that always we see their trucks that we're like, who owns that company that I always see their truck in my local town, right? That's it. It's those companies. And the big private equity firms, the 100 million, 500 million, 2 billion, 20 billion, they need to buy big businesses to deploy that capital.
Right.
So it just woke up to me. I never knew this space existed. It just woke up to me being like, holy smokes, over the next 10 years, this silver tsunami space is massive. There's a massive silver tsunami wave coming of these businesses have to sell and they have no one to sell it to. So why don't we just raise a pool of capital that professionally buys these small to mid-sized companies? Why don't we create a Berkshire Hathaway-like model that
Right.
we're no BS, no a-hole, just super simple, straightforward, easy, that we're just like, if you have a good business with a good reputation, a good moat, you have a good management team, you've been around for a long time, and you're making at least $2 to $10 million a year, we'll give you a fair offer. We'll close a deal. You could stay on if you want for another year, 2, 10, forever. You could leave if you want, you could roll over equity. If you still want to own a piece, you could sell us 100%. You could sell us 40%. We don't care. We're just going to be in service to all these small to mid-sized companies, and we're going to buy them. And once we buy them, we're going to put them under our holding company. And that holding company, like a Berkshire Hathaway, right? Or like a Mars Candy or like a whatever, right? We're going to buy them. And once we buy them, what are we going to do with them to make them grow, to make them better? We're going to do culture, technology, and sales. Those are the 3 things that we wake up and our holding company does every day for the companies that we keep buying. Is we help them with culture, we help them with technology, and we help them with sales.
But let me ask a question. So, like, are you coming in and taking a controlling interest in these companies, or like, how does that work? Because obviously, traditional private equity is going to want to control the business. You're coming in, you're buying these, great legacy. I mean, what you're describing, is the backbone of the country economically and entrepreneurially, right? So the boring, I love boring, by the way, like love. Like everything you talk about, I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. That is our country. That is what's made America so great. So when we're looking at those businesses though, and you're coming in, are you taking control, or like, how's that work? That's my first question. My second question is, when they want out, like, I mean, I'm assuming you haven't ran and I know some of the businesses you bought recently, like let's use the one you bought in Tennessee, which is a janitorial company. I'm assuming, you don't know anything about running a janitorial company. So if the guy wants out 100%, how do you handle that? Both ways, control and when they want out completely.
Yeah. So the question that I ask business owners is, what do you think would best serve you and your people? So the janitorial business in Tennessee, that gentleman was a 80-year-old gentleman. His name was Gary Duncan, amazing entrepreneur, amazing leader. And he was like, Mike, I'm 80. I think he has 9 kids. He's like, I haven't even been involved in this business lately. So all the questions you asked me, I'm not going to know the answer. You could ask my CFO. You could ask our current GM that manages the business, who, by the way, is his son that's 33 years old. You could ask our COO. You could ask those people. I want out, and I want to sell. I own 100% of the business. I want to sell you 100% of the business. And we say, if that's what serves you best, great, we will do that. Right. And so that answers that. But then there's another business called Rev Partners, that they are a sales ops as a service. So, tech startups that need sales operations, but they can't go hire full-time sales ops people,
right?
Or companies that need to deploy HubSpot and manage HubSpot, all that stuff. These 2 gentlemen, Matt and Brendan Tolleson, they started Rev Partners, and they were doing amazing. They were growing like crazy. And they were like, hey, right now, we really, really, really like what Garden City stands for. We really want to sell a large chunk of our business, but we want to still hold on to the majority. Would you guys be willing to buy a minority stake less than 51%? We're like, do you feel that that's what serves you and your people best? They're like, yes. It's like, great, then we'll do that. So our answer is, we want to honestly serve what works best for the business owner. Naturally, in these Silver Tsunami situations, all of their chips are in one basket. So they want to diversify their wealth. They want to pull it out. And once they hear why we want to buy the business, because we believe we could grow it a lot, they typically go from saying, I just want to sell you 100%, to being like, well, I'm going to have to do something with all this capital. So why don't I just roll over some equity and still own 10 or 20% and
Right.
and ride this journey with you guys? Because you guys are probably going to grow my janitorial company from Eastern Tennessee to all of Tennessee to all of the Southeast. And if I own 10 or 20% of that second bite of the apple might be worth what my entire bite is now. Right.
Yeah.
And so we're just flexible on that. The second answer that you gave is, what do you do if someone wants out? Typically, the number one, so we've looked at hundreds of businesses. We've looked at about 400 companies a year. So we've looked at thousands of companies now. The number one reason why we do not buy companies is because their owner hustles. So we ask a lot of questions in diligence, like on the janitorial business, right? So we say, talk to us. Do you know a lot of the customer? And he's like, no, I've been out of it for a while. Oh, well, what are your financials? I don't know. I've been out of it, but you could ask my CFO, and so forth and so forth. That's good. That's good. That means that he's an owner of the business, and he is not a bottleneck, and it's not an owner hustle, right? He actually has a healthy non-owner management team. So if you take Gary out and you put Garden City in, the business still operates just as is, and hopefully even better. Versus every call that I have is, so who's your largest customer? Oh, largest customer is 123 Acme. Oh, and they actually just bought yesterday for $7.54, and they bought last week for $10.45. You know, I'm actually about to go play golf with Joey over there, who's their head of purchasing. Okay. Hey, so what's your turnover? Our turnover is 14%. The person that got fired last week, I sat down and I fired them. And you're saying that you are going to leave the business, like we're buying you out. Well, it sounds like you're the thing that makes the business actually work. So almost all small businesses, unfortunately, Darius, are owner hustles. So that's what we have to look for and discern. So to answer your question is, when we look for a situation, we're looking for a healthy non-owner management so that once that owner leaves, the business does not go down.
Oh, got it. Yeah, that makes sense, right? And Darwinistically, it makes the business more valuable because you can step in and buy an asset. One question I have on that though is, you know, and I have a lot of friends in private equity. I was talking to a good friend of mine, Byron, about this. He said, you know, one of the issues is that you'll have these higher level executives in those types of businesses where they, you know, they wanted to do an MBO or they want a piece of the action. And so when, you know, Johnny, the CEO, or Sally, the CEO leaves, they're like, well, Garden City owns us now. Like, what is this, like my jail cell where they're cool and they care about culture and they care about me, but I want a piece of the action. I'm building this company, darn it.
Totally. And I agree with them wholeheartedly. Darius, I think the best people in private equity are the ones that didn't come from private equity, because we have such an obvious approach to things. Hear what you just said, which is it's a situation that comes up all the time. You have these people that are the CFO or president of an organization that they've been working there. Most of these people don't have equity. These owners don't give them equity. They pay them their salary. And then all of a sudden a new buyer comes in, and the new buyer is like, well, congrats. I'm the new owner now, and you're going to keep working for that $200,000 a year. And we're going to own 100%. And we want you to think like an owner, because we're not obviously in the same city as you, but we're not going to make you an owner. So we want you to think like an owner. But so every business we buy, the management team that we have there, if we want them to think like an owner, we make them owners. That's what Garden City does every single time. Every single management team we do, we want them to think like owners, so we give them equity to be owners.
What, like when you do that, are you, because there's some, you know, has to be meaningful enough. Do you say, okay, 10%, 5%? Is there like a range equity wise in your mind that you're like, this is an important number where we want to keep these 5 people happy? Or, you know, how do you kind of formulate that?
It depends on the size of company, right? So if it's a company that makes $1 million a year, right, you're obviously not going to carve out only 2 or 3%. You might need to go up to 10%. But if it's a company that makes $5 or $8 million a year of profit, right, you probably are not going to do 10% of profit in that, right, if it's a much larger company. So we just try to right size of aligning our interests. That's what we try to do. We try to align our interests with the management team of saying, one of our golden rules is we treat you the way that we want to be treated, right? So if I was in their shoes, I want them to be as incentivized as we are, right? So it depends on situations.
Totally understandable. Yeah, are you guys doing just profit sharing, or are you guys doing actual equity in the business? Well, I mean, you're never selling the business though, so does that even make
That's the issue. Yeah, that's the issue. So we treat it like equity, but it's basically, hey, as long as you're here, you're going to get this profits interest. And then whenever you leave, because we're going to sustain you longer, you know, we'll just buy you out of whatever, as if it was a transaction, because that's the way our model works, right? It's a cash flow model, right? It's a cash flow model.
Yeah.
And so the way that you make your return is through cash, is through profits. And whatever percentage of the business you own, that's a percentage of profits that you get, you know? And then if you ever leave, we'll obviously bring in a third-party advisor, unbiased, to value the business, to say, oh, this business is worth X times, so you should get paid X times that cash flow.
Yeah, I love that. So I have a question for you. And I know we're running a little over here. So I'll make it quick. So you have these 50 investors, and it sounds like they're in it for the long haul. and you guys raised the 50 million bucks between that group. But I know that you have massive aspirations. Like one of the coolest things about your story, and anyone that has half a brain on the shoulders should go check out your website. It's joingardencity.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, gardencityequity.com or joingardencity.com. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I was like, doing research for the show, it's you want to build one of the, I believe it's like one of the largest, most successful holding companies in the world that's passionate and that takes care of the people, right? But 50 million is not going to get you there.
No.
So obviously you can build some enterprise value in these businesses, but even if you 10x it, which would be amazing, now you're at 500 million.
No.
That's still like a blip on the radar. Are you going to raise additional funds? Are you going to go back to your investors? Like what are your thoughts on the future of the growth of Garden City as this model proves to be successful?
Yeah. So a key word that we say is we want to be the best holding company in the world where all of our workers can thrive. So we want to be the best holding company where we give an opportunity for all of our workers so that they can thrive holistically, right? Economically, socially, financially, spiritually, right? We want to give them the tools and resources they can thrive. A key word I did not say there is that we want to be the biggest holding company.
Gotcha. Okay, sorry.
There's a great book called Small Giants that talks about arguably the best companies in each one of their arenas are by no means the biggest. Many times they're some of the smallest, if they do things freaking excellent with greatness, right? And we know a lot of those companies, right? That we could start rattling off of who are some of the brands that you love most that do it with greatness. They're typically not the largest ones. So we want to be the best holding company in the world where all workers thrive. Now, given that, we're not going to just stop at 5 companies that we're at today, right? We're not, and probably in the next year, we'll probably be at 7 companies, right? So we cannot do that just on $50 million. So we'll probably deploy this full 50 million in the next year or so, and then we'll raise more funds into the holding company, right? So we could raise however much money, right? We could raise, depending on how big and how fast we want to go, we could raise just another 50 million, which, we could keep on getting perfect and being excellent and buying the same amount of companies and making them the best in their industry. Maybe raise 100, maybe we could raise 350 million. So I'm not quite sure what that is, but the number one thing we tell ourselves is how can we be the best stewards to the companies we're buying? But it's not number of companies. It's every industry we find ourselves in. We want to be the best in that industry.
So, what initially you had said that you wanted to keep it to 50 investors. When you guys raise the next fund, are you guys going to bring in new investors, or you'll go to the well again, and you're assuming that your investors are happy, though I'm guessing most or not all of them will reinvest. But what's your thoughts? Is it like, hey, if we 5,000 investors, if they're the right investors, is the world your oyster there, or is there what do you think?
Yeah. So we have one key criteria for our investors. They just need to be mission aligned. They need to be mission aligned investors that realize it's about purpose and profit, not just profit. And sometimes there will be sacrifices financially to do the right thing for our companies, right? That are accessible. So there's plenty of athletes and big Fortune 500 CEOs I've spoken to that they're like, oh, hey, speak to my family office person. And they treat this as just another investment, another private equity investment in their portfolio. We don't want you. We do not want you. This is not what that is. Our investors get together once a year, husband and wives, for 3 days for a shareholder summit. And we are a family. We are a Garden City family. When our investors go to different cities, they hang out with each other. They stay at each other's houses all through Garden City. That's how they met, right? They're doing other deals and philanthropy and sporting things all with one another. So we really want to protect that. That's like our moat. Our moat that everyone tells us that's involved in Garden City is like, what we have going on here, don't screw it up. This is like super special. We're buying companies. We're all getting behind them. We're investing in them. We're helping support them. We're visiting them. We're taking the CEOs out. We're rolling technology. We're changing cultures. So that's the biggest thing is when we bring in other investors, which we obviously will, they just have to be those type of people. Okay. And then if we raise, 200 million in our next go around, we'll obviously go to our investors that we currently have and say, hey, you put in 50 million. What capacity do you have to go towards the 200? Maybe we only get to 75. Maybe we only get to 100. So that'll obviously create a gap, a deficit to bring in new investors, which since closing our last fund, we've met probably another 50 people that are amazing that I wish I got in, right? But unfortunately, the fund's closed. So they'll fortunately get in on the next round. And that's, by the way, Darius, that's how we get all of our deal flow. So all like today, one of my investors just pinged me saying, hey, there's a real estate service company, a property management company. They're looking to sell. Another one of my investors that just pinged me about a fire extinguisher company saying, hey, they're looking to potentially take on investment, right? There's a pickleball company, right? That someone just pinged me about, which I'm really excited about. So our investors are so integral to what we do from a deal flow as well as a culture and value add perspective.
Yeah, love that. That's so cool. Two last questions, and then we'll get wrapped up here. How big is the current team? I mean, you guys just got started. You raised your money. You've bought the first few companies. Like, how big is the current team at Garden City?
So in the Garden City Holding Company, we have 7 full-time people. And we have very specific focus areas, right? So I focus on our investors and our vision and our culture. We have another partner that he focuses on business development and cultivating the relationships to keep bringing deals that we potentially want to invest in these small to mid-sized companies that are looking to sell, right? As well as any other investment that's minority deals. We have another partner that's from private equity that he leads our investment process. He is a gentleman on his team. We have someone that leads all of our portfolio company operations around culture, tech, and sales. He is somebody on his team as well. We have someone doing events and marketing and my chief of staff. So I guess 8. So it's a small team that split their time across our companies. But the thing that makes us sleep at night is sometimes we feel overwhelmed, but we're like, wait a minute, Warren Buffett only has like 10 people in Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah.
How can they do that? Oh, I know why. It's because they only invest in companies that are already self-sufficient and have a high performance team. They don't need to step in to help run that company. That's the biggest thing that we need to always keep in mind is if we buy the right companies, we could just come alongside their team instead of being their team.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And my last question is, do you think you'll ever sell any of these companies?
Yeah, I think we will. Yeah, I think we will sell some of these companies. I think we have a financial stewardship to our shareholders and more importantly to the employees. So I could see there being an example where we're in an industry trying our best as opportunistic owners to serve this business, but there could be a lot more opportunities if a very, very good, another family office or another strategic buys them that helps serve them or helps give them more opportunity or helps grow them in a better capacity that we can, right? There's nothing on the books right now, but I don't want to say never, right? Or maybe there's an industry that, Amazon is just eating our lunch and we see it coming from a mile away. And it would just be very prudent and wise for us to not just stay and see our gross margins just get depleted year after year, right? And so there could be a plethora of situations, either better ownership or we just see something coming that as wise financial investors, we don't believe that we are best suited to navigate that storm if someone else does think that they can. But our thesis is that we intend to hold forever. Got it.
So it's hey, we don't ever have to sell. There's no 10-year time horizon where we got to close the fund out. We could hold this thing for 100 years. This could be we could have a company that ends up being the oldest company on earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Or not. We don't like this industry anymore. It's getting disrupted. We want to get out of it, and we're taking our fiduciary responsibility, and we're going to do what's best for the shareholders.
Yeah, something I dream about a lot is I don't know if any of my kids will ever be in Garden City. By no means do I need them or want them to be, but I do hope that 30, 40, 50 years from now, 60 years from now even, they hear the stories within these companies that I'm involved with today. That last week I was in South Florida, next week I'm in Knoxville, the week after I'm in Birmingham. I'm visiting all of our companies. I just hope that how I love these people and how I write them letters or how I just bless them and try to really, really, really focus on people could somehow be a legacy, a generational legacy that somehow decades from now that just continues. So I do think really long term with these businesses.
I love it, man. So last but not least, I know that we're going to get wrapped up here. First of all, I read somewhere that you guys pay people $125,000 for any referrals for a company that you buy. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, if anyone ever refers us a deal and we end up ever investing in that business, we give you a check for $100,000. In addition, we donate $25,000 to the nonprofit of your choice. I have story after story. I think of the 5 businesses that we've invested in now, or the 6 companies actually, because there's a tech company that we made an investment into. But out of those, 3 of them came from friends. They just said, hey, my buddy's looking to sell the janitorial business. He's 80 years old. He's looking to sell. Or, hey, this guy owns 2 businesses. He's looking to sell his pool company, or someone else like, hey, there's an IT service business that he's looking to sell. And so it's a way for us to say thank you. A lot of times in the private equity world, they call these proprietary deals, and they take people and they wine and dine them in hopes to get deal flow. They save the fees of investment banking fees, but then they don't do anything. So for us, we're like, if they're helping us not get these deals that go to market through investment bankers, shouldn't we be like radically stupid generous and be like, here's $100,000 for a finder's fee. Plus, let's also always focus that it's not only about profit, but it's also about purpose.
Yeah.
$25,000 to the nonprofit of your choice.
Are you guys buying deals? By the way, that's awesome. I dig that you do that. I love the give back. Are you guys working with intermediaries as far as sourcing deals too, or is this mostly all word of mouth?
Yeah, so we really do 2 separate sides of deals. One is the model we've been talking about the whole time of we buy boring, unsexy, operational companies that have been around for a long time that are throwing off millions of free cash flow that need a succession or liquidity plan. But also we've started to do deals that are just random, whatever opportunistic deals that our investors could be super helpful for because of who they are. We're like, yeah, that might be a tech company or a real estate company or a franchise or whatever it may be. That's just a minority, investing with another 50 people deals, right? And so in the traditional model of the operational companies that have been around heavy cash flow, I would say 50% of them come from us from intermediaries, like investment bankers and whatnot. And the other 50% comes from our network, from proprietary people.
Man, what an hour. I was so excited to have this conversation with you, and I learned so much about what you're doing. And man, I just can't wait to see where this goes. I just think it's going to be enormous, and I'm really pumped for you, man. This is super cool.
Thank you, Darius. Thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a great show, and I'm grateful to be on it.
Oh, likewise. So anyone that wants to learn more about Garden City, what's the best way for them to hook up with you or Garden City?
Yep. You could just send me an email at michael@joingardencity.com, or you go to our website, Join Garden City or gardencityequity.com. Add me on LinkedIn. I'm always on there as well. And yeah, we'd love to stay in touch. Another thing that you could do to stay in touch with us is on our website. Just sign up for our service report. Every 2 weeks, we send out a curated email. It's a pretty awesome email. It just has a bunch of curated articles from all across the web every 2 weeks, just around culture, redemptive good work, good technology, innovation, the small business space. So it's a pretty neat article that you might like. We have about 3,000 subscribers right now.
Oh man, I can't wait to sign up for that. Guys, man, what a treat having Michael here today. Listen, if you love this show, share it, go to his website, sign up for anything and everything to learn more. And I'm going to say this because, like I said, I met Michael just by him coming up randomly on my LinkedIn feed years ago. Your LinkedIn is awesome. You have a great feed on there, and there's a lot of garbage on LinkedIn, but you have a great feed, lots of value there. You're a value guy. You give a ton of value to the world, and I'm so excited for what you're doing next. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Guys, listen, if you love this show, share it. The word's got to get out. This is the way that business needs to get done. What Michael's doing, this transaction ship that we see. I didn't get to say this, but I'm going to say this right now because you're doing it. I tell people that I believe the next 10 years, mission, vision, value-driven organization are going to stomp the competition into the ground. This is the way of the world. This is where we're going, and it's people like you that are making it happen. I'm so proud to have you here, my friend. And guys, thank you so much. Peace out. We love you.
You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.